Thanks for coming. My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, buddy. There you go. That's a cool audience. It's a nice audience, right? Yeah, man, everybody's excited to see it. Congrats on Django.
Oh, thanks, mate.
The process by which you picked Jamie Foxx is interesting, but you were going to put them through some kind of camp, some kind of
it was just,
version of that?
No, it was just I was really sure about, I wanted to make sure that I got the right person. But
so you were looking at Idris Elba, man. You were looking at Michael Kenneth Williams. I hear Tyrese even, right?
Yeah, Tyrese, Terrence Howard, Chris Tucker, and some really good people.
Why Jamie Foxx? Will Smith too, right? But why
Will Smith, yeah.
Why Jamie Foxx?
Well, all those things kind of went out the window when Jamie Foxx came over to my house to talk to me, because I just realized I'd found Django. I didn't need to go through all that hullabaloo. And we're around more or less the same age, so he was in Texas in the 70s. He had experienced racism before, and not just in little ways. And that was really interesting. But also at the end of the day, frankly, he was my cowboy. I could see him on the horse. Actually, he has a horse. In fact, his horse in the movie is his horse. That really hasn't happened since Roy Rogers. All right, so that's good. But I could see him being a cowboy, especially like in the '60s when every good-looking actor had their own Western show. If they cast black actors back then, Jamie Foxx would have had his own Western show in the '60s.
But in this particular film, right? I mean, you're dealing with it's 2 years before the Civil War, so there's this great opportunity to talk about America.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity to delve into that part of the slave trade and that world. Has it always been of interest to you?
No, I've always been fascinated and also repelled, but the repulsion leads to more fascination. Like the way housewives that can't get enough of serial killer books.
Right, yeah.
That freaks them out, but they can't read. They got to read more.
Because it might be around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And but it's also, I mean, as an American, it's just, it's the stain on the country that hasn't been washed out to this day. We're still dealing with it, and what I wanted to do, I mean, it seems like to me that most of the movies that get made about slavery, most of them are TV movies, and they're just done. They're historical with a capital H, and I always think that kind of puts the pain and the anguish and can even be bravery of all the slave narratives that could be told that haven't been told, because one, America's afraid of it,
right,
and the population is afraid of it, both white and black.
It wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then but also, when it's always put into this historical distance, it just keeps it at arm's length. It's almost like history under glass. I wanted this work to be a work of imagination. And that doesn't mean I'm making stuff up as I go along, but that means it is a story, and I'm telling the story like I would tell any story.
Well, I suppose for all the criticism you've gotten over the years for using the N-word in your films, it's all over this film. There's so much in this movie that at one second I thought it was a Tupac moment, because it was just constantly, you just kept hearing it over and over again. I suppose historically it would be more accurate in this case, right?
That's exactly the case, yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that this whole thing started for you, relatively speaking, right? And if you think about your last shift at the video store to your day at the Oscars, not that long.
Yeah.
No,
it's been about 20 years.
Yeah.
I started 20 years ago.
Your worldview at 49 would be different than your worldview at 25.
Yeah.
So, has it affected the way you want to tell stories, knowing that you just see it differently?
Yeah, what's interesting though, I mean, like in the case of Jackie Brown, that was kind of interesting because I had such a success with Pulp Fiction. I thought it would have been foolhardy to try to top it. And normally a filmmaker's feeling is to want to top the last thing they did. And I just knew that would have been a foolhardy exercise. And I'd read this one Elmer Leonard book that I always really liked, and I liked the idea that I could go possibly underneath the success of Pulp Fiction to get it a much more character-based movie. And, I can imagine somebody thinking that that's the kind of movie I would make now that I'm getting older. Well, I made it as my follow-up to Pulp Fiction when I was still a really, fairly young man.
Right. But so after Bastards, then, I mean, that's another huge success.
Yeah.
Do you then have it in your head, you're like, I don't want to follow that up with a...
No, I wanted to top it. I wanted to top it.
I want to go back way back into a film that came out when you might have been a clerk.
Hello?
Hello, baby.
Clarence.
Oh, yeah, who are you expecting? Aldo Ray? Now, look, Cecilia, no. Rich, the reason I called you is because I'm having a party, and I want you to come down here. And it's in my place, except it's for my best friend, Mickey. Yeah, it's his birthday.
Tell us what that is.
Yeah. That was the first film I ever made. It was called My Best Friend's Birthday. The thing was, while I was admittedly disappointed after spending 3 years on something and realizing it's basically not worthy for the guitar picks, having said that, I was aware enough to see that while I maybe didn't know what the hell I was doing at the very beginning of the movie, that the later stuff that I'd shot, the stuff after working on it for 3 years, the stuff I'd shot the last year was decidedly better.
Right.
And I could see I was getting a grasp of things. I was kind of learning how to make a movie. And so rather than just be super depressed and just give everything up because my first big attempt that I had put everything into ended up being nothing, I just looked at it as a film school. And, and as far as film schools go, it was pretty cheap.
Now, the key is, by realizing who you are and where you are now, there's absolutely nothing to stop you from going all the way. In other words, maximizing your potential.
You're back with Quentin Tarantino. Dude, you were a PA on a Dolph Lundgren video.
That was my first professional job. Yes, it was. now, actually, it was funny, though, because in that regards, it's okay. That was actually how I got that job. Is the guy who was the director on that was the guy who created Cops. But he hadn't created Cops yet.
Right.
And he used to be a clerk. He used to be a customer at the video store, and I took care of his whole family. And so he just gave me a job.
Yeah, your old pal Spike Lee is doing Old Boy. If you could remake a classic movie, what would you make?
Oh, gosh. I guess nothing, because I guess I could remake anything I wanted, and the fact that I haven't answers that question.
Great answer. We've heard about how you had the Inglourious Basterds story for a long time, and that you were just trying to find out what the story would be, and you had this script. What's your current version of that? Have you got something that's just been a bunch of scenes that you haven't been able to put together yet?
No, I do have an idea, but I kind of want to write it first as a book. And I've got 3 chapters of it written so far. So I kind of want to just write it as a book and see if I'm inspired to turn it into a movie, or if it's like I just get it out of my system and that's that.
But what do you do, so you know that this film is going to deal with the conversation about race in America today. People will talk about it. What do you feel about where it's at?
It's, there's, on a day-to-day, day-in, day-out basis for most people in America, it's okay. Things have gotten a lot better. People are a little too sensitive to talk about stuff, and that's a drag, but that's the way it is. But on a bigger level, it's very depressing. This whole thing of this war on drugs and the mass incarcerations that have happened pretty much for the last 40 years has just decimated the black male population. It's slavery. It is just, it's just slavery through and through. And it's the same fear of the black male that existed back in the 1800s. And, there's a reason, especially having even directed a movie about slavery, and, the scenes that we have in the slave town, the slave auction town, where they're moving back and forth. Well, that looks like standing on the top tier of a prison system and watching the things go down. And between the private prisons and the public prisons, and the way prisoners are traded back and forth, and literally all the reasons that they have for keeping this going are all the same reasons they had for keeping slavery going after the whole world had pretty much decided that it was immoral.
Right. A real pleasure to see you. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks a lot, George.
Quentin Tarantino, everybody.